Guys, I printed way too many decks. I'm not even kidding when I say that part of the reason I'm doing this whole video essay thing is to defend them. Dan Reynolds and his friends deserve a little more credit in my opinion, or if not that, they just deserve to be seen for what they are, since I feel like people are always getting at them for what they're not. Dan and the boys just released their 6th studio album, LOOM, and if you give it the courtesy of an open mind, there's more going on within it than you might expect by a band known for soundtracking Vroom Vroom, Big Man, Big Car, Right Now, Bye If You Like the Big Car. Here's the deal, okay? I was a fucking nerd as a teenager, and their first album, Night Visions, dropped when I was 12. I was in the sweet spot. I was playing video games. They make the video game songs with the bleepity bloop and the epic sounds. It's fine. The band have also been tied to some fairly big segments of my personal life, including my old main YouTube channel, which, that's another story, but we'll get to that someday. The basic thing I'm trying to say is that I've followed this band's trajectory with every I've followed the Imagine Dragons trajectory with every era for over 10 years now, and that's afforded me a connection as a fan that allows me to see more of who they are as people, and see what sort of people follow them as more than just casual fans, and get more context for what they're expressing in their music. Obviously, this means that I am going into LOOM with different expectations to you. Either way, there is some context we might share, and that's why I want to talk about why LOOM is different from its predecessor Mercury, which was, whether you like that album or not, a lot. Is this really my life? Mercury was a hard ask for the general public. It was an album rough around the edges by design, incredibly blunt about uncomfortable topics, and had a couple of singles that didn't even seem to want to be accessible in the way that their previous songs were. Even the more traditional sounding Imagine Dragons songs had a never before seen weariness to them. Mercury was an album with an especially personal surface for Imagine Dragons. If you're a fan, that's rewarding, but if you just think of the band as the guys that sell Jeeps to muscly dudes in Ohio, it's a harder sell, especially considering the damn thing was 31 songs long. 31 songs! And I'm not even counting Enemy from Arcane, the musical, featuring Sonic and Knuckles and all of the other dudes. Mercury just wasn't going to hit the Hot 100 like the older stuff. It's not the easiest sell to get the general public to care about a band that they associate more for what is sold to them when they hear their music. Imagine Dragons aren't unknown, but they're not celebrities enough for the sanctity of their story and their suffering to be the thing that wins people over. Perhaps due to its stark bluntness, perhaps due to the oversaturation that they felt a few years earlier with Evolve and especially Origins, perhaps due to the general pop crowd's relative disinterest in the band's content itself, Mercury didn't do so well, entering at number 9 on the Billboard 200. The album did end up harboring a couple of hits in Bones and the Arcane soundtrack song Enemy, but those two seemed to succeed in spite of the album's performance. Cut to the promotion for LOOM. Dan and the boys have said that they wanted to make something with no filler, put out a tight release, in direct contrast to the 31-song expanse that was Mercury. And 2 years later, it arrives. How did LOOM turn out? LOOM does a couple of things that immediately make it more appeasing to those that may not be as big a fan of the Dragons. Firstly, it is indeed a sharp release, sitting at a brief 9 songs and 27 minutes, if you ignore J Balvin. I'm ignoring you, J Balvin. I'm ignoring you. It also helps that the lyrics are a little bit lighter too. Unless you're actively engaged in what the band is doing, it's likely your most favorable memories of them tie back to the indie rock fun of their first album. The clapping and stomping of On Top of the World, the solemn hope of its time, and they're good comparison points, because when I listen to LOOM, I hear touches of the energy that originally charmed people back in the Night Visions era. Fun percussion and production, glimpses of beautiful orchestral moments, a pleasant warmth of hope and truth. That energy comes out in a couple of different ways throughout, but there's one way in particular that I'd like to talk about, and that's that the band are just silly. They're silly boys. That's it. That's the transition. Take me to the beach! Well, they're all fathers now. Dan Reynolds has 4 kids. That's a big part of the goofy dad-like playfulness, and there's a ton of it. Every verse in Wake Up ends with some variant of almost nonsensical. Take Me to the Beach has a metaphor, but sounds ridiculous anyway when running alongside its chipper summer funk production. And my personal favorite sort of silly goofy moment on the album is that if you listen closely to the closer Fire in the Hills, you can hear the band screaming "Fire!" in the background of the first chorus. I don't know, I think that's fun. This might be a bit of a sidetrack, but this silliness is what Loom improves upon versus something like Origins to me. Part of what didn't click with me with the latter was the combining of their silliness with their expansive, serious production. Origins opted for softer, sweeter song topics, and that's fine, but they then proceeded to slam the air out of them with harsh compression and weird production choices. For me, it got in the way of the songs to an extent. Loom is what happens when the band tweak that balance and get it closer to something that feels right. The production plays alongside the goofiness of the vocals, getting unserious when the band is. I mean, just listen to how the album starts. Loom is less anthemic and more akin to a daggy parent. Some might interpret it as incompetence, but I hear it as silliness. The clumsiness feels intentional and endearing to me. And I really wanted to hammer in on the silliness aspect because it's something that often gets lost when Imagine Dragons are represented in big terms. Sure, their largest hits take themselves very seriously. That's part of what's empowered their success. It's made them so suitable for so many fan edits on the internet, and it's connected their hearts to many. But in their best moments, there's always been a tinkery sort of fun running alongside it, a curiosity that's unafraid to look overish or clumsy. The band have always had a playful side. It's just never been logical for them to show it when their biggest hits have been songs that take themselves as seriously vocally as Demons and Believer. Parts of Loom that I enjoy the most contain that playfulness. The venturing into two-step on Fire in These Hills, the weird chopping decisions and changes between build-ups, the interspersed chatter in Kid. The band play around with song structure and unique production elements in a way that feels refreshing to me. It's like they're putting the boxes aside for what they have to do to be Imagine Dragons, and instead they're just making what they're curious about. To be fair, it's not all silly. I don't want to discredit the pain that went into the writing of many of these songs. There's context that looms over this. Coloring the album are Dan's personal struggles. Having split with his wife of 10 years, many of the songs on Loom have the energy of looking back in the rearview mirror, reflecting and dealing with that sadness and change. In Your Corner and Don't Forget Me are the most lyrically direct, but self-destructive tendencies and drug references pop up too on songs like Eyes Closed and Kid, painting a stark picture. Sure, there's a comfiness and a fun to the album, but there's also a solemn sorrow. The saddest moments and the happiest moments both feel to me like they're passing, intertwined but never permanent. Dan's writing is still very much on the literal side as it has been for the past couple of albums, but in doing so, that literal nature bears the truth and lets the emotional weight of his feelings ring out for us to take or leave. This is gonna feel like a big segue, but I am gonna tie it around. Loom is lighter, brighter, and briefer than their last album, but whether they intend to or not, Dan Reynolds and his band are doing what Imagine Dragons and a handful of other super popular bands of their stature do best, and that comes in what powers those AMVs and commercials. Just because something is vague or emotionally reachable on a surface level doesn't make it any less potent. The biggest artists in the world all connect their music under large, widely accessible questions that affect big demographics of people. That's what makes them the biggest artists in the world. Simplicity in music is beautiful because with it comes the ability to connect large groups of people. And sure, there's always going to be a cynical aspect to that fact, because the music business is a business. It wants to expand its reach wherever possible. But while one person might walk away from Loom, or any Imagine Dragons album, and feel like it was unexciting and held no nuance to it, another person might connect to it specifically because of that directness. And it's all the taste. Some of us value subtlety, some of us don't. A lot of the time it's more specific to the artist and our preconceived notions. Critics are more likely to reward subtlety and nuance because small hidden things are easy indicators of craft. But there's genuine skill in making something catchy too, making something that can be accessible to many without feeling redundant, overdone, or already heard. What we like speaks to who we are, what we relate to, and what our values are. You don't have to like something because it's popular, but I think it's important to acknowledge with a lot of bigger artists that they have their platform because they're resonating with a lot of people. They're doing a lot to bring up the total joy in the world, even if you don't personally find yourself a fan of their music. Their platforms are as big as they are because they're enacting a lot of positive emotional change. And this is more than just an Imagine Dragons thing. If you're willing to try to hear the music out and empathize with that audience, you might find you'll get something out of it, no matter the artist. It's why as a fan, I always get a little bit saddened when I see people joke about their music being for racists, or seeing bad faith TikToks about them just existing at the writers' strike. They've been successful without needing to define their personalities to the wider public, and as a result, people that aren't fans don't know what they stand for a lot of the time. I think that's a shame when they've helped support Ukraine, started festivals in the name of LGBTQ+ support, and routinely supported trans rights. As of recording this video, Imagine Dragons are set to tour Loom in a couple of months. They'll play all around the world, and every show, thousands of people will have a great time and get a chance to forget about the problems in their lives for a night. At the end of the day, that's value. And I think artist aside, that value is always worth recognizing. Subjective taste on music be what it is. If I want to do one thing with this channel in terms of how I talk about music. I want to encourage people to give each artist the benefit of the doubt. If they're popular enough for you to have heard of them, even if it's against your will, then there are tons of people out there that they've managed to reach. Even if you don't personally have use for it, there's value in it. Imagine Dragons get maligned for a few reasons. They've been turned into the face of a version of rock music people don't like. The music is heard unwillingly a lot of the time due to their commercial licensing. The audience that their music appeals to is often unclear to people. And they've been successful enough to receive eyes that wouldn't have ever chosen to seek them out otherwise. And a lot of the times those eyes have turned to voices. But they're getting those eyes in the first place because they're doing what every other successful artist is doing. They're connecting with people. That's why I think it's worth giving LOOM a chance overall. It's breezy, it's completely unbothered with being corny or daggy, and that can be pretty fun. But more than that, it's an experiment. If you're someone that might not necessarily be into the band, or if you have certain sort of feelings about them that you have, I challenge you to challenge those. And instead of viewing it as a corporate release, view it as a personal one. View it as one designed to connect. But hey, if you don't like it, it's over pretty quick. There's like 8 of these fucking degs.